Why do stones move all by themselves in California's Death Valley? Can frogs and toads really live for centuries entombed in solid rock? Do the mountains of Mongolia still harbor Neanderthal man? Did he die out 40,000 years ago, or does this ice block contain a survivor? This man helped build the world's first atom bomb. Has he also found the key to the age-old puzzle of ball lightning? The journey from the great rock of Sigiriya in Sri Lanka has taken us all around our Earth and beyond. To Stonehenge in England and the midsummer sunrise. To Atacama in Chile and its unknown giant. To Ireland and midwinter's dawn at the oldest building on Earth. These have been the wonders of the mysterious world. In the snows of the Himalayas, we have followed the tracks of its elusive inhabitants. And deep in the forests of North America, caught glimpses of shadowy creatures. In Costa Rica, the giant stone balls remain a mystery. In Munich, the Baghdad Battery is still a powerful enigma. These have been the mysteries from the files of Arthur C. Clarke, author of 2001 and inventor of the communications satellite. From his home in Sri Lanka, after a lifetime of science, space, and writing, he has pondered the riddles of this and other worlds.
In this series, we've scanned an entire spectrum of mysteries. Some are amusing, some are trivial, some are complete enigmas, some we may even have solved. But they vary wildly in significance. Some, though fascinating, are probably quite unimportant. Others, if we could fathom them, might change our entire understanding of the universe.
Dawn over Death Valley reveals an earthbound moonscape amongst the most hostile territory in all America. Bitterly cold by night, blistering desert by day. Its only inhabitants are herds of wild donkeys. Yet here, strange tracks keep appearing on the baked surface, left by huge boulders, stones which seem to move under their own power, curving and looping for hundreds of yards and even for miles. The scene of this weird phenomenon is Racetrack Playa, a dried-up lake on the edge of Death Valley. Geologist Dwight Carey, with his new bride, has made the 7-hour journey here from Los Angeles. For more than a decade, he has been trying to find the key to the strange forces which cause the stones to move.
I think we can conclusively say that there is no doubt that the stones do move, that the stones move distances in one movement apparently upwards of 200 and 300 feet. We're talking about stones from the size maybe of your little finger on up to large stones of 600 or 700 pounds.
No one has ever seen a stone move, but Carey quickly ruled out hoaxers. They couldn't have moved quarter-ton rocks for hundreds of yards without leaving telltale traces. He also discounted theories that Racetrack Playa was affected by mysterious vibrations or magnetic effects. As each new and serpentine track appeared, it was painstakingly plotted.
All right. Now we'll stretch it tight. 74 feet 4 inches.
Carey marked each stone with a stake to measure how far it moved. He painted the corners to show which way each faced. He even built corrals around groups of them to see if they all moved at once. It took him 7 years to formulate a theory. He thought that perhaps once every 2 or 3 years, rain and wind joined forces to produce precisely the right conditions.
The playa surface is probably rather firm, but contains a thin layer of very slippery mud, possibly with some water standing on top of it. And the wind is able to pick the rock, start the rock to move, and slide it across on the firm base, but pushing aside the very slippery mud and sliding right on top of that as it moves. It's probably moving a couple of feet per second as it rides off across the playa, and after 100, 200 feet of movement, or sometimes just a very little movement, the stone will eventually come to rest as the wind dies down. I believe it's basically changes in the wind during the time when the rock is moving that cause the stone trails to be so variable. The wind not only being funneled through this area, but the cliffs that protrude out sometimes give a whirlwind type effect, so that the wind is actually whipping around in different directions. Basically what we've done is develop circumstantial evidence that builds to the point of saying wind on a sloppy playa surface is the only explanation we can come up that's legitimate. No one has ever been out here and actually seen a stone move. Probably it's a fact of nature that it only happens on dark and stormy nights when no one in their right mind would be out here in the first place.
The moving stones of Death Valley are quite surprising, but I'm sure that Dr. Carey has solved this minor mystery. But there are other mysteries to which we'd like answers. I have a hunch that one of the most important of all mysteries may be ball lightning.
The definitive sighting of ball lightning was the one at Crail in Scotland in 1966. Mrs. Jean Meldrum and her mother were at the beach cafe one August afternoon.
I looked up because I heard this noise getting louder and louder, and there was just like a ball of fire. It was like orange in the middle, and it was luminous white round, and it rolled right along the side of the cafe, when the wall in the cafe, and it came to the window, and it came out the window. And I came up, lifted up the way to have a look to see what this was, and the thing came out the window and battered across the front of my chest. And then it vanished because I picked the kid up and I went inside because everybody was panicking by this time. But I was sore for days after it, and there was nothing else to see after it had gone. But it was just like a big ball of fire. All of a sudden, the whole kitchen that I was standing in just lit up luminous white. I couldn't understand it. It was very frightening. And then the screaming went on till the beach was empty. The cafe people had all run out the cafe. They ran out like lightning. And the beach attendant, who had a wooden leg, he usually sat on the table just next to the counter. And you never saw anybody move so quick in all your life. He was gone with the rest. And the following day I discovered the 2 gas jets on the top of the cooker were cut right through. And we had to send it to the blacksmith in Crail, the local blacksmith, to be repaired.
A year before, across the Atlantic, Clara Greenley was having an irritating afternoon.
I was trying to swat a fly that'd been around aggravating us for I don't know how long. Why, I turned to look at my neighbor, and when I did, I seen right outside the screen in that direction this ball of lightning. I didn't know what it was. Why, it appeared the size of probably a basketball, or maybe a little larger, and it the color of it was like orange, more or less, and it had like a halo around the edges of it. So just about the time that I was talking to my neighbor about this fly, it came in and I hit down, and when I did, this ball of lightning, it fell to the floor, rolled around a little, and exploded and made a terrible sound, I guess about like a shotgun. And my neighbor looked at me and said, "That ought to got him."
Ball lightning terrified peasants and killed a pig in Salignac, France in 1845. Diane de Poitiers was chased by it on her wedding night in 1557. In St. Petersburg, Professor Richman was killed by it. And at Gorges de Loup in France in 1901, ball lightning disrupted dinner. In 1868, a Viennese eyewitness painted what he saw. At Edinburgh University, ball lightning apparently penetrated a window of the meteorology department. And at Castleford in Yorkshire, it was photographed during a storm at 2 o'clock in the morning. At Los Alamos, birthplace of the atomic bomb, dramatic clues to the mystery of ball lightning have been found by James Tuck.
Hi, Mr. Tuck. How are you? Fine. A little cold.
Professor Tuck has distilled its characteristics from eyewitness reports.
This ball, very characteristically, floats through the air like this. The ball, on the average, is about a foot in diameter. Sometimes there are people who say they've seen it a yard in diameter, and there are some people who claim they've seen it about the size of a walnut. It's not very bright, about the brightness of a 100-watt lamp. Now that's pretty bright at night, remember, but in the daytime it's nothing special. It's said to make a fizzing, buzzing noise. It lasts, on the whole, on the average, about 5 seconds.
Stories from the US Navy submarine service put Tuck onto an experiment. Submariners told him how clumsy switching of the batteries could produce fireballs which often burnt their legs. At Los Alamos, Tuck persuaded some colleagues to help him in the lunch hour to try to manufacture ball lightning. For on the very premises where he had helped build the atomic bomb, Tuck had discovered they had a gigantic submarine battery, as big as a power station, but now redundant. One day, the last before the battery was due to be dismantled, they decided to surround the switchgear with a small concentration of methane gas.
Well, we set out this experiment with a cellophane box around the switchgear, and we were all behind the sandbags about 100 or 50 feet away from the switchgear. We had the cameras rolling, and we took the picture. And I'd made a bit of a blunder, a small mistake about the right gas concentration in this box, with the result that instead of the gas merely serving as some kind of component in any future ball lightning that we hope to make, the warming by the arc caused it to explode in a mild way. Now, the arc itself makes a big noise, but what happened was the whole thing went wharumph like this, lifted the roof a little, and we were all staring at this with our jaws dropped round our ankles in horror. Well, then that was the experiment, and that was over, and we did a little illegal champagne drinking and said, well, it was a good try. We didn't succeed, folks. And that was that. The colour film of this kind has to be processed elsewhere, and when it came back from the lab and we examined the last film, to our profound astonishment, there was an object on it. We could see the explosion and so on, but there was an object which came along towards us, bounced on the floor, went off the frame. It had a diameter of about 3 inches in diameter. It was on 150 frames of the film. Both cameras showed it, went behind something and came out again on the other side. It floated. It didn't fade. It kept the same brightness. I must say that that it had a lot of characteristics of ball lightning. Can I say as a scientist that we made ball lightning? I'm afraid not. Because an honest scientist must repeat it over and over and find the conditions for when it does it and when it doesn't. But this was an ex post facto affair. We couldn't repeat it. So all I can say is I think if I were asked honestly, had we made ball lightning, I would say at a 50-50 chance we had.
Ball lightning involves matter at very high temperatures, the so-called plasma state found in the cosmic furnaces of the stars. Through its study, we may be able to create here on Earth sources of infinite power, and then our energy problems will be over forever.
But it's mankind's past to which this grisly cadaver offers a clue. Known as the Minnesota Iceman, entombed in a glass-topped coffin, he was the star exhibit in a traveling show which drew astonished crowds in the late 1960s. The keeper of the corpse, Frank Hansen, claimed it had been found locked in an ice floe off Siberia in the Sea of Okhotsk. For the show, the ice was painstakingly pared down over the body. Zoologist Bernard Heuvelmans has spent a lifetime on the track of unknown animals. By chance, he was staying with a colleague in America when the Minnesota Iceman was revealed. They hastened to examine it.
There was no doubt that we were looking at some sort of man. Not Homo sapiens, but some sort of strangely hairy man. We were struck by many things, the enormous hands and the enormous feet, and also, more especially, the features of the face, because it was absolutely unlike any man on earth. It was obvious that this creature had been killed because the one eye was completely missing and the other was hanging out of the socket, and it had blood all around. So we thought it was probably shot in one eye and the bullet made the other eye pop out.
At first, Heuvelmans had expected a fake, but now he believes the Iceman was genuine.
From seeing it, there is no question that the Iceman could be a hoax, a faked dummy, rubber dummy, or what have you, as they told in the press. When you have seen something, we examined this creature for 3 days, very carefully, and we were very suspicious, I can tell you, at the start. But after a while, that was quite ruled out. No, there is absolutely no doubt for me that I have been examining a Neanderthal man, a surviving Neanderthal man.
Heuvelmans' account made world headlines with his proposition that the fresh frozen corpse was a Neanderthal, man's closest evolutionary relative, previously presumed extinct for 40,000 years. In the furore that followed, the Iceman was spirited away, and many other scientists claimed that Heuvelmans had been duped. Yet perhaps his idea that Neanderthal man may still be living is not utterly outrageous. In 1941, this man, Viktor Juszczyk, a Polish exile who now lives in Blackpool, was on the run from a Russian prison camp. As he wandered across Mongolia, he came face to face with a wild man.
For a moment I was terrified and at the same time excited. He was very broad. He's got no hair on his face. He's got wide mouth. He's a Mongolian and Eskimo type. Very broad, white teeth. His look is, you never see anything look like that. This is Stone Age man.
This wild man was reportedly shot by Russian soldiers that same year. A Red Army colonel, V.S. Karapetyan, said its shape was human, but its eyes were dull like an animal's.
One of the foremost authorities on Neanderthal man is Dr. Myra Shackley of the University of Leicester in England. In 1979, she went on an expedition to the Gobi Desert, where she thinks that Neanderthal men may still be found. If so, this would be a stunning discovery and would open a whole new chapter on human evolution.
Dr. Shackley gathered her evidence in Mongolia's Altai Mountains, where the creatures are known as almas.
I got a picture of almost unanimous agreement that strange, wild people were living in the high mountain areas. The Mongols say that they're human in appearance, but that their speech isn't the same as the Mongol speech. There's been no attempt at direct communication, although they trade by putting a parcel of skins on the ground, then retreating and then coming back later to collect what's been left in exchange. There's a recent report of a Russian doctor who, in treating some of the Mongols in a very remote area, met an Alma family. So there seems to be no doubt that the creatures are there. They seem to be rather short, stocky, and to be very shy. And it's also mentioned in many stories that they are rather hairy and have very primitive clothes. In this respect, the description of Neanderthal man fits the Almas really quite well. If he managed to get into the high mountain areas, then there's no reason why there shouldn't be adequate breeding populations of Neanderthal man still surviving. And indeed, this seems more likely than the alternative, which is that a very successful species of man should suddenly become extinct for no apparent reason.
Persistent reports of the survival abilities of another type of creature have brought Dr. Mike Tyler from Adelaide University, Australia, to Brighton Museum and its Cabinet of Curiosities. Here lies a mermaid, marooned among the grotesque relics of the air and sea. And strangest of all, this rock, which was found in 1883. Inside, in a secret cavity, a fully grown mummified toad.
The specimen was discovered by a man working on the roads by the name of Mr. Nye, and he picked up this particular stone, and although it seems rather heavy to me, apparently he noticed that it was a good deal lighter than usual, and as a result he split the stone open, and inside for the first time discovered this strange dead toad.
This toad emerged alive from a solid block of coal, which had been burning in the hearth of a Mr. W.J. Clark at his home in Bath Street, Rugby. Although it had no mouth and no rectum, it lived on for 5 weeks. Old books, like White Watson's Strata of Derbyshire of 1811, contain further reports. At Eastwood Colliery, a toad was taken alive from a coal seam in the fire engine pit, but died immediately on exposure to the air. And at Cowden near Ashford, 2 toads were found alive in a block of marble. In a letter to the Times in 1862, a Mr. Scott reported 2 cases of toad in the hole. One was found in the middle of a 4-foot stone, which later formed part of a plinth in Birmingham Town Hall. Scientific American, as recently as 1933, carried the story of a frog nicknamed Old Rip, after Rip Van Winkle. He seemingly survived for 34 years beneath a concrete roadway at Schenectady, New York.
The specimen in my hand is quite an intriguing one, and it's indeed an oddity. However, this particular nodule, this particular stone, in fact contains an aperture at one end. The aperture is about 1/2 inch in diameter. It's a little smaller than the diameter of my small finger. And it is conceivable that the toad crawled in through that hole at a stage when it was quite young. It perhaps found insects inside there, and there's certainly some evidence that some insects are attracted to toads, perhaps by the peculiarities of their smell, smells that we can detect too. And so we can envisage a situation in which we have the toad here inside a cavity, inside the rock, eating and eating and eating until he reaches the point when it's quite impossible for him to leave. He in fact is larger than the aperture through which he crawled.
In 1825, the naturalist Dr. William Buckland buried some toads in sealed stone cells for a year. Some survived the first 12 months, but not a second gruesome interment.
As we referred to Buckland's experiments, to animals which can live for short periods of time and perhaps live without food for a year or more. But in rocks we're talking of millions of years, and there's no way in the world in which an animal can survive without food and water, or survive at all for hundreds of thousands or millions of years. It's just impossible. And so when we have these stories of pieces of rock being split open with smooth surfaces, cavities in the middle, and frogs walking out, well, that just remains an absolute mystery.
Well, one day we may know the answer. But even if you solve all the mysteries we've discussed in this series, there are plenty more where they came from. For our universe is not only more mysterious than we imagine, it is more mysterious than we can imagine.
Thank you.